everything is a crisis, and life doesn't have to be a crisis. It doesn't have to be stressful. We can build our boundaries around ourselves and have what's important to us that gives us energy instead of drains our energy.
Hey guys, before we get started, I have one quick favor to ask of you. Can you please hit the subscribe button so that more people can find the show? Thank you. In your work, you say that it's all about trying to find your spark. Where did that begin for you? Trying to find your spark.
Well, most directly, it happened the week before I retired. Now, I was 69 at the time, and I had gotten an email in my inbox at Boeing right after the first of the year, and I at first just didn't pay it any attention, but after 2, 3 days, it started. Wait a minute, my career has been to facilitate the success of other people and to empower them. And this email kind of sounds like it might take that another step further. So I looked into it, and it was collaborating with a community college here. And I thought, well, this could be the next step of my career, whether I'm working at Boeing or not, And it was a coaching class that was about a mile away from where I live. I mean, how convenient. I love it. So I tried to twist Boeing's arms to subsidize my new class because it was $10,000. And no matter what I try to do, well, we won't be able to take advantage of this investment in you when you're leaving, going out the door. I needed some more convincing skills, I guess. But that class started the week before I retired in April of that spring. And the first thing they taught us was how to write our essence statement. Now, they called it essence statement at the time, but now essence has gotten a lot of publicity and used in a lot of different ways. So I have renamed it Spark or Inner Spark, or you might understand it as being an intrinsic motivation. And my company, I decided to call Effortless Vitality, because when you're living from your heart, it flows naturally, kind of like a river. It's well, in fact, there's some books written on living in the flow of both delight and productivity and innovation. And I want to bring out the best in everybody. So I, at the end of that first weekend, they had us stand in a circle and read our essence statement to each other. And as it was going around the circle and coming my direction, I was noticing people were kind of sniffling a little bit as they read it or after they read it. And I thought, what's that about? But then as it came my turn, I felt like nobody had ever asked me to define my soul before. And this is what I read. I am precious jewel of wisdom. I am colorful collaborator, motivator, and learner. I am tranquil, authentic, and pure inspirer. I light fires. That's part of that. Getting your effortless vitality going is lighting a spark to that energy. And I want to help everybody know who they are on the inside. And just in the last few months, I've started using the phrase, I think it's from Aristotle, know thyself, know yourself. So um, I, uh, I started saying, well, what's inside your soul, your DNA, your GPS, your inner spark is what gives you energy and fits you like a glove. It just is so proper, and you can find fulfillment and contentment by expressing your spark. So it was really kind of easy to do, but we did use a whole weekend we actually came to class with having done some exercises about listing 20 things you love to do. What's your personal qualities? What is it that you like about yourself? I've always had a pretty good smile, that's in my favor. What are your hot buttons? What does hot buttons have to do with this? Well, what's your aspirations, your hopes and dreams and goals? What's your values? I can't tell you how important your values are in this process. And I don't know that we ever look at them enough. And then your guiding principles. My mom, where there's a will, there's a way. She had built our growing up that if you want to, well, hey, ask a 3-year-old if they're trying to get into mama's uh, kettle cabinet and they want to play some music on the kettles, they will find a way. Well, we need to find a way when it comes to our dreams and our ideal life. So anyway, that's I'm now enjoying tremendously inspiring people on podcasts because the what what's inside of this is invisible, right? So I've started calling it our invisible assets. You know, I can't look at Eugene and tell that he's a dynamite debater or the first chair in the trombone section of high school. It's invisible to me unless we get into conversations like that. But you know what's inside of you. You know what you're capable of. And I I believe when we live from what's inside our soul, our uh, DNA, that we're able to change the world and bring harmony and healing to our world today. And it is I think it might actually bring a little bit of heaven on earth. That's my goal, and I want to inspire 10% of the boomers and anybody younger than that to live from their best, what's best inside of them. And you know, we've been bullied and um, devalued and laughed at, and I can't tell you, I'm still pondering how much trauma steals that from us. And I feel like I've done a lot of recovery work from the trauma I went through. And yet I think there's something still holding me back. Could be. I'm willing to look at it. And we'll probably talk about this more, but Powered by Me is a book I'm reading right now that she talks a lot about energy. And she had experienced burnout as a 33-year-old doctor in the emergency room. Everything is a crisis, and life doesn't have to be a crisis. It doesn't have to be stressful. We can build our boundaries around ourselves and have what's important to us that gives us energy instead of drains our energy. So we'll probably talk about that a little bit more.
One thing I want to point out about your vision, it like you can see, you can feel the energy about how passionate you are about your spark. Was this something when someone asked you how to describe your essence or describe your soul? Was this something that you knew in that moment, or did it take some time to self-reflect and research in order for you to come up with that concise statement
Oh
of
yeah,
what your inner spark was?
good question. Good question. So they mailed to us this little, I don't know, 18-page uh, well, it's not a contract, it's a process. And before we came to class, so there's about 8 or 10 exercises in this process that is quickly defined here. And so they said, well, it could take you I don't know, maybe yeah, they said 45 to 60 minutes if you do it all at once. Well, I kind of like to put things on the back burner. and see what simmers up, what boils up. And so I allowed myself a couple weeks to fill it out. And as things would pop into my mind, or oh, remember this, or whatever, then I would make some more notes. So I went to class that first weekend with having done quite a bit of thought around it. Your dreams and aspirations, they cover like 11 categories of life, your reputation and your family and your career and wealth and on and on. And they allow you to write 4 or 5 things about each one. That does take you a little bit of time to do that. But I've cooked it down into a module process on the Great Discovery platform where you can move from one module to the next as you've considered and answered each of the exercises. But the beautiful thing that kind of makes it super interesting is that when I said I'm a precious jewel of wisdom, that's wrapping all of these elements into an artistic kind of expression. I right away had realized it was kind of like, the Bible talks in parables in the New Testament, and it was, like it's like a farmer who has a vineyard. Well, I'm like a jewel. It's that picture that forms with your description. So I choosing jewels as a my metaphor came from a very awesome experience I had in Dallas, Texas in May. I don't know what year. Oh, it could have been about 1998 or so. And there was a art show festival, Mayfair, that's what it was called, around the Cowboy Stadium. And I went kind of late in the day, and but people started to pack up their vendor places. But way back in the back corner, there was a jewelry. He was a geometry teacher turned jeweler. That's an unusual combination, but his jewelry was so unique. It was just amazing. I love unique expression. And aren't we all a unique expression, ladies and gentlemen? And he had created what he called stackables. So it was putting 3 or 4 rings together, kind of as an ensemble. And when I tried them on, something moved in my gut. What was that? What's going on? So I took them off and slowly put them back on again, and it moved again. I was amazed, dumbfounded, what's going on? And I kind of slowly backed off and but I did talk to him a little bit more, and I thought, oh, I wonder if they have any of these that are recycled, that people sell. And the lady, in fact, one of the ladies at the booth was, in fact, had, I think, picked up a couple of sets that way, but it was so unique. And a couple years later, when I was reading books about how self-development books on describing yourself and your contribution to your team and your job, and using something like an element, either in nature or whatever. And I decided to use those jewels as my description of the quality and the brilliance and the value and the sparkle and all that represents both the jewelry, but it also in some ways reflects my contribution to my team at work. And so when it came to having a metaphor, something for my metaphor on this intrinsic motivation, or essence, then I brought it up and used it again. And yet, I think part of what you're getting at, Eugene, is the elements that I described myself was very positive. And not everybody may see themselves in a bright light of positivity. It may be a dim light of positivity, because you might have been laughed at, bullied, called names. You know, life isn't always kind to us. And my experience very young in life, like I sometimes had a flash of being in my crib, being stiff as a board, scared stiff. And somebody actually told me that did happen. And I wanted to be invisible, to be safe from the abuse that was going on in our home. My whole life in my family. Now, I was a lifelong learner, even at a very young age, because I skipped second grade. My older brother and sister had flashcards that mom had me sit and use their flashcards, 3 + 2 = 5. And I thought, well, I just sit here listening to them recite their math, I'll pay attention. So that gave me a running start for first grade. And I was able to do extra work and be able to skip second grade. But I'm this last year, I've really come to ponder and want to understand how much our trauma of any age holds us back and can stifle the best of us. So maybe it wasn't intended to um, like how many times you get spanked or beaten or, bitten, put in well, even car accidents or anything that causes a lot of, to hold us back and stymie us can be something that winds up stopping us and getting us stuck. But if you can keep looking at the clouds in fact, one of the things I like to hold up, I love these words of positivity, because they're kind of spiritually oriented, but they open your spirit up to hope and courage and possibilities and wisdom. And that can help lift us up out of our trauma if you look for it and seek for it. But I think I've gotten a little bit off track a little bit, but what comes to mind for you, Eugene?
Yeah, what a lot of what you're bringing to light there is, and I see this across a lot of especially high achieving type mindsets, is where they've experienced a trauma or they've experienced a certain experience in life that has driven them to a point of either using that pain and channeling that pain into their work or into the contributions that they make in order to never feel that pain again.
Yeah.
Or they use that pain and they seek a solution to escape from that pain. Again, either by channeling into work or by developing a habit that doesn't really serve them in the long term, but they pick it up at the time as a way to mask that pain. Or they create an identity of themselves that they do not associate as being the same person who experienced that pain. And they're running away from that version of themselves that experienced that trauma in the past. Now, these three versions of themselves are three parts of themselves that they have created in a way. They're coping mechanisms in a way. It's a way of surviving, of not feeling that pain or trauma anymore. But we may develop a lot of time we develop these things in childhood. Yes, you might have been spanked or beaten as a child, And that drives you. It's like, okay, I never want to experience that again. So I'm going to dissociate myself from that part of myself and create a new version of myself that does not associate with that pain and trauma. And that might serve you in let's say a coping mechanism as a child, but if you bring that same narrative into your adult life, it might be holding you back from
Yeah.
developing friendships or relationships, or in your work you might be very distant, and it might not be clear to you at the time when
Yeah.
this happens,
Yeah.
because you might just have this feedback loop in your head that says, oh, we don't do this, or oh, we don't get closer to people. What we do is we immerse ourselves in the work. Oh no, what we do is, instead of getting closer to people, we keep them at a distance. We're civil, we're polite, but we don't let them get too close in case they see that vulnerability. This is
Yeah.
something that we see a lot. I'm sure that you've probably seen this too.
Yeah. In fact, I don't know if I can quickly open up to book. Well, she has an assessment that says how much pain or gain do you feel in, because I especially popped into her emotional energy chapter. That was what was interested me. And between home and, well, family and work and play and friendships, relationships, how many can you say are on, you're in the gain side of that big topic, or the drain side? And I couldn't answer them very well. I might have a problem here. So I've never married and never had kids, and I'm 77 and I brag about it. But um I so I'm pondering that I may not be expressing my emotions as in a healthy way. I don't feel like I'm shut down, but there could be more, and especially with relationships. I've never wanted my dad to walk me down the aisle. No way. But there could be something that I could heal and embrace in life that, in fact, helps me open up to being more a better relationships with guys. I don't always claim that I didn't find men all that interesting. Well, maybe that's a blockade I need to work on. But does that kind of relate to what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. It's the narratives that we put in place that
Mhm.
give us that sense of safety or a sense of structure. Again, it all comes down to psychological safety. And we can tell ourselves something that will, in a way, protect us from harm,
Yeah,
protect us from a fear of vulnerability, protect us from a fear of rejection, a fear of failure. And while that narrative might help in one area of our life at a certain period of time,
right.
if we hold that for 10, 20 years, or maybe we've a change of environment, something that we might have picked up in our careers in our 20s, next thing, that's not going to be the same as our career in our 40s. But we are
Hmm.
still going to hold on to that narrative because it protected us at a certain time. Now our life completely changes. We can change as a person. The people that we surround ourselves are going to change as well. But if we hold on to a narrative that may have helped us when we were dealing with a very different environment, the way we are showing up in this new environment is being limited by how we are protecting ourselves from what could have happened in the past.
Yeah,
Whereas if we can find a way to be present in the now, realize who we are in the now, what we want to achieve in the now, and be able to open up to others, that's a big step for a lot of people who may have been holding on to that old narrative for the best part of 10 or 20 years minimum.
oh, you stuck, so you have to repeat yourself there. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It was again that people can get stuck in this feedback loop, this narrative
Yeah.
that they've been feeding themselves this narrative that may have protected them for 10 or 20 years ago, but it's not serving them anymore. But they
Yeah.
don't know because they've been saying it to themselves all this time. They don't know how to change that. They forget that this was a system that they put in place to protect themselves. And because they've been saying it for so long, they think that that narrative is a part of their identity. Oh, I can't change that. That's a part of who I am.
Well, in fact, I transferred from Seattle to Tampa, Florida, with my job, and that opportunity to be a whole different person crossed my mind. I could be this a new persona, in Tampa because nobody knows me there anyway. Well, 4 or 5 people from here had already transferred down there. But I didn't run into them very often. But that did cross my mind that I could be, I could be wear different style of clothes, or I could be out in society and rarely home. I, I like to be at home. uh, but yeah, that opportunity crossed my mind that I could take on something different. So, but what kind of tickles my brain too is how often have we, like you learn to tie your shoes, and then when daddy tries to tie your shoe foot, wait, I can do it myself, or I'll show you, how often does that come in? And that's part of what, if you try to get I'll never be an alcoholic like my dad kind of thing, you might overreact in order to compensate for what you don't want to be like him. So
Yes, yes, that exactly and it can come full circle that way. For a lot of people, where they see something as a sabotaging behavior, and then they become like the antithesis of that, where they pick up an equally sabotaging behavior, but because it's not the one that they viewed as someone else using, oh, it's not over drinking, but it's abusing some other substance instead, or it's, oh, but this is working for me, I'm functioning as a member of society, so I'm not a deadbeat like my dad. They can twist the narrative to serve them, or to serve how they see themselves, to see their identity. And while it might be equally, if not more destructive,
yeah.
they will be able to skew that narrative in a way that will serve them, and that everyone else is wrong, or the whole world is against me, or society is trying to push me down, rather than addressing for themselves, like, is this the kind of person I want to be? And that's a very raw and uncomfortable place to put yourself in, to confront yourself with things and being like, if I if I step out of my body, and if I was to walk down the street and see myself, even to look at my reflection now, is that the kind of life? Am I brimming with life? Do I have that spark? Do I have that fire lit within me? And if I don't see that in my face now, if I see myself as being completely drained and lifeless, what can I do to change that? What changes do I need to make in my day-to-day life in order to bring that fire, to bring that spark back into my life?
Yeah, it reminds me of a podcast I was on recently, like in the last month, and um, he had just been doing podcasts in just a year's time, but he said an event had happened a year ago that um, made him tell himself the real truth, be really honest with himself. And I think he used the word authenticity, or being authentic with himself. And because of it, that in fact drove him to doing the podcast as a way to um, live a new life, I guess, going forward, or having a different kind of purpose or reason for his life. um, uh, see, something else is that I've been doing a loneliness to resilience membership community to help people move from being lonely to being resilient. And one of the guests I brought on was, in fact, a man that I believe his dad was a horrible alcoholic. And because he hated that so much and it, you know, bothered, injured, I've heard that alcoholics are terrible about calling people names, or telling you how stupid you are, kind of thing, and all that. And he he did go into being a police officer and probation officer, but then an accident happened where he fell and hit a glass table, and I don't know, whatever it hurt, but he was in like months of recovery in the hospital with this injury. And so now he had a reason to abuse pain pills and drugs and maybe alcohol or vodka or whatever. Now he had his own pain to solve, have a salve for. And he's now recovered, but the choices he made in the recovery, he had an excuse now. And yet what they say is not so important what happens to you, but how do you think about what happens to you? What is your truth that you make from that experience? And the life in his case put him in a situation that was had the same, he handled it the same way his dad had handled his pain. So that's that. In that, having that, Leo was his name, that my guest started making me aware that trauma can sidetrack us without any intention, and yet who do we want to be with or without that trauma is still our responsibility to define. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's how we move forward from that. It's the first step really is to look within and to reflect on it, to acknowledge it for what it is. We need to I really love IFS coaching, the internal family system, where you can recognize those parts of yourself not as, oh, the trauma is a bad part of me. It's like, no, it's a part of you that was created from an event and is now trying to protect you in a certain way, but maybe it's done its part. It's finished protecting you in that time, and it no longer needs to show up as often as it is in your life. It's getting triggered by things that are no longer a threat,
Like,
and
thank you
that's
for
holding you
keeping me
back.
safe. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it's like having a parent trying to take care of a child all the time. Next thing is like, Mom, I'm 24 years old. Stop trying to pull me back from crossing the road. And that's an overprotective parent. But it's the same. We could have parts of ourselves that were developed to protect us from pain, and it's trying to pull us back from situations that we're like, no, this is an opportunity for growth. This is an opportunity for me to experience something new. But because we have something in our past that's trying to hold us back and trying to keep us from that pain, that we go back to old habits or old systems that we use, or old feedback loops in our brain that cannot tell the difference between us being 8 years old or 24 years old or 44 years old. And it's like, oh no, this is how I stay safe. This is how things have always been. Oh, you're not the kind of person who meets up with people at night. Oh, you're not the kind of person who does karaoke. You're not the kind of person who does this, who does that. Well, that's an old system in your brain saying you're not the kind of person who does these things, rather than saying, oh, you've never tried this before. How about you give it a go and see if you like it, and if not, let's try something else. Or if this doesn't work for you, you know what does work for you? Sitting at home. It's it's these different loops where you need to it's very hard to go from like night to day with these loops. You need to acknowledge them and be like, I acknowledge you for what you are and what you're trying to do. And I thank you for that service, for trying to protect me.
Right.
And you did protect me for so many years. But now I want to try something new. I want to grow so that I will not need you to show up as often as you do. I will acknowledge that you are still a part of me. But going forward, I want to experience new things. So thank you for being a part of my life. And I acknowledge you as part of me, but it's okay. You can go to sleep now. You can take a day off. You don't need to come and protect me all the time.
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
it's 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 yes, it's being able to acknowledge these parts of ourselves.
well, and it kind of makes me think of how many parents, they'll say, well, you can't make a good living or have a good career with art. It's too hard to make a good living with expressing your art or singing or acting. And so they try to talk you into a safer, more steady paying kind of career. And yet it's not like Dr. Niha, is it a gain or drain? Changing your career based on your parents' values puts you in kind of that drain. In fact, I should mention also that when trauma is not healed, you're carrying around that trauma energy all the time, and it's draining you every day in I'm sure a very small way probably, but having to go into a career that your parents steer you towards. Like I've read several books that started out with I became a lawyer because that's what my dad wanted me to be, and after 10 or 15 years, the getting up and going to work was just not that drain had gotten so serious that leaving the house was in fact a chore until they started aligning and waking up to the voice inside of us that wanted something more and different and something for me, not for my parents. So that's another wrinkle of this getting off track.
Yeah, that's a very powerful narrative that I see in people in their 30s and 40s. People who
Yeah.
say they never wanted to be a doctor, they never wanted to be a lawyer, they never wanted to be an engineer, but that was the path that their family put them on. They said, "Oh, this is your route to success. You go through medical school, you go through law school, or you go through university. You become an engineer. These are the three paths to success if you want to be of high status."
Parents wanted her to be an engineer, and she did the engineering first. So yeah,
She
there's
did engineering and then the doctor.
yeah, yeah.
And because they feel they put so much time into the study and into all the experience, and they finally get to the position of a doctor, lawyer, or engineer, even though they don't want it. And it's like, well, now you're in your 30s or now you're in your early 40s. You can do anything. Your parents are not holding you back. And they're like, yes, but we put in all this time and all this effort to become one. I don't want to put that all those years to waste. And then the one shift in the narrative is like, okay, you've spent the last 20 years of your life working to be this engineer or this person you really don't want to be. You don't want you dread going into the office. Do you want to spend the next 40 years of your life doing the same?
Yeah. I was shocked when I liked doing profiles that kind of tell me who I am and how I'm different from Eugene and what gives me energy versus him kind of stuff. And it came shortly after I had retired, and I thought surely when I read the results that this has got to be wrong. I've never had a a profile be wrong like this one was, but I'm sure you got the wrong person here. But it called me an influencer. Who, me? Who, me? You're talking about the wrong person. And I let that kind of simmer on the back of my mind a little bit, but I didn't pay it much respect or honor. And I gradually, somebody called me from New York to invite me to be on a podcast, and I don't know what they had found or figured out, but they thought I had something to say and might be interesting guest. So I pondered that a little bit and finally said yes to being their guest. And then it hadn't aired more than 3-4 hours, and they were already calling me back. And yeah, you had energy and you had something to say, and we think you could have your own podcast. Really? Well, maybe. But so over the years, I had been collecting words of wisdom, and let's see, like here's one from Oprah: feel the power that comes from living, doing what excites you. Well, yeah, I could inspire people with that. Feel the power that comes from focusing on what excites you, because that's your energy. Um, let's see, have you forgotten who you are is another line from The Lion King. And oftentimes, as people go into retirement, they forget that dynamite debater and trombone player that they still are, because that's inside of you. Anyway, so yeah, I started um, doing podcasts because of this profile that came and said, you're an influencer. Okay, we'll see. But okay, so about that same time, I participated in a webinar from the UK, and it was called How to Have Mental Strength. Oh, nobody's ever had a class named that before. And I didn't realize that it was like an hour for 5 days. I had conflict with 4 of those, but so I showed up on the first day, and uh, the the thing that they said to have mental strength, especially like say Eugene is going into a meeting of 10 people, and you can sense that there might be some contention there. So he said, well, before you walk in the room, first stop and recall to mind a warm memory. A warm memory. His warm memory was he'd always wanted to fly an airplane. And the warm memory for him was the day that he got to take his 4-year-old son on a ride in a plane that he was flying. So he was remembering the weather that day and what they put on, the gear they put on to fly the plane and get the plane ready and all that. And he had a picture of his son sitting in the back seat of his airplane. And he just felt all these emotions about that day. And so he had us recall bring to mind a warm memory. And I recalled something from 3rd grade where I was a reader for the school play Christmas time. And nobody taught me how to be a reader, so I started looking around. Okay, who's a good being in front of people and all that. Well, cutting the story short, 6-8 days later, I thought, why just have one warm memory? Let's see what I could make a list of warm memories. And after 8 or 10 things that I listed, I stood back and looked at the list, and I thought, half of those were in front of people. What made my warm memory about being that reader was somebody had recognized and complimented me on how good a job I did. Oh, that felt so amazing. And maybe I was supposed to be in front of people, that influencer that profile told me that had just come in the mail. It's a big aha for me that maybe my trauma had side railed that influencer vein in me. And now I get to make some new choices in retirement and blossom, you know?
Yes, because you mentioned off air how you're naturally an introvert. And this is something that I was told as well, because again, I did all of these profiling, trying to understand myself. And everyone's like, oh, because you're introverted, you're INTJ or whatever, you're very introverted in your ways. So you don't want to spend time with crowds of people. And I'm like, it's true. I don't like dealing with big crowds of people and crowded busy rooms and I don't get energy from being in a crowded room. But that doesn't mean I don't like meeting new people. Like, I might be introverted thinking, but I love connecting one to one or connecting in a small group and
Oh,
not dealing with small talk, superficial conversations. I cannot deal with small talk, but I love getting to know a person and getting to hear their stories. And so when I started podcasting, people were like, why are you talking to so many strangers? I thought you were an introvert. And I was like, I'm still introverted, but I like to channel my energy into small groups, into very deep conversations. And I can't do 12 individual people and go very deep in one day. That will be exhausting.
mhm.
But with the energy I do have, I love to be able to channel that energy into deep, effective, kind of like concentrated energy conversations they don't drain me. When I'm in that environment, I come out of that conversation fueled up again and excited and brimming with energy. So that's something that I get gain from. It doesn't drain me. And that was something that, because of the profiling, that someone said, oh, because you're introverted, you should only be doing introverted things. Whereas I knew that, okay, if I take this at face value and I only do the things that this quiz result tells me, then I'm going to spend a lot of time alone at home and feeling that, oh, because of this quiz result, I should not be going out and meeting new people because that's not good for me as an introvert. Or I should not be going out and getting out of my comfort zone. So what I did was I was like, yes, I know myself enough that I don't like big crowds, but that doesn't mean I'm going to purposely avoid big crowds. It just means that when I am out and I might feel a bit drained, I know that it's because of my environment. It's not an internal flaw of myself. It's something in my environment that I cannot control. And maybe it's I need to take a break or I need to listen to some music and ground myself for a bit.
Yeah,
It's
perfect.
it's it's, it's being able to understand in the environment you're in what's in your control and what's not in your control. It's not something that holds you back from doing something that you love. It just means that you need to better monitor yourself based on who you are as a person. Just like you said, as being an influencer, it was something that you because you said of your experience, it wasn't something that it's something that could have come to light naturally. It could have been exposed some way in your life earlier in your life if other things maybe had not gotten in the way. But now that you've realized at 77 that you're an influencer and you had that energy, and once you started to express that energy in ways, as you said, going on other podcasts, going on Transformation Radio and things like this, where you could start talking about yourself and open up about your story, other people started to feel that influencer energy from you.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, because I know another thing on my warm memory list was doing Andrew Carnegie and Toastmasters and applying myself diligently to the assignments there and trying to do my best, putting uh, personal initiative and focus into doing a good job. But um, I, through my career, I think that the word that I would use most to describe my career is being responsible and diligent. And in fact, my first 10, 15 years, like, well, my bosses, they'll know when I'm ready to move on. They'll take care of me. And you have to wake up to, no, they won't take care of you. You got to take care of yourself. So the power, in fact, I have something, I've been talking to people quite a bit about knowing yourself. And this to me, the spark and essence is about knowing what's inside. And because it can help you be more confident, more know what your boundaries are and being okay with it, being able to give yourself more self-care. And as you were talking about the introvert, one way to help go into a situation um, consciously and have your boundaries and self-care is to say, I need to go and give it an hour and see how I'm doing, and then allow myself to come home and remove myself from this big crowd, and just know that your limitations probably won't give you the energy to go 6 hours at a big event, because you'll be deflated like flat tire when you get home. But so let's see. Oh, so Dale Carnegie, yeah, and Toastmasters. In fact, I did go to a Toastmasters convention in Nashville, Tennessee, and wow, what an experience that was. But um, I'm now seeing myself being on stages in the next a year or two to be speaking to people with the um, the inspiration and encouragement and um, helping all of us to realize we can have a part in healing the world, because our unique expression of why we're here is on the inside of us, and we can know why we're here and we're still breathing, and we have a job to do. I found it curious when somebody asked me here a couple months ago, a lot of times speaking um, is terrifying to people. And they said, well, what is it? How do you feel when you speak? 'Cause I've spoken at a women's conference in Arizona, and I felt like I was doing my job. That's not scary at all when you're doing your job.
I love how you phrase that when you said it was doing your job, but for a lot of people they shrug that off, and it's similar as in the way you said it, it's like, oh, I'm just doing my job, but a lot of people just go, yeah, it's just my job, and they like they're very humble about it, or or they're almost too humble rather than being like, this is what I do naturally. This is what comes almost naturally to me.
Flowing out of you. Yeah.
Yes, flowing, exactly. It's something that comes, as you said, effortlessly.
Yeah. Instead of, in fact, stress has all kinds of implications, that you're making yourself meet a deadline or making yourself meet a goal. And instead of reaching for it, there's not the same stress um, or energy drain when you're reaching for it, because it matters to you. It's something that you need to do because it's in fact giving you contentment and fulfillment. Um, so I heard someone use the word recently, harmony, that if we could describe our communities and cities as being harmonious, what a difference that would make. The healing of our civilization needs. I mean, it sounds so beautiful to have harmony. In fact, beauty is another one of the things that I value. And do you know what you value? In fact, here's one of my art blocks that gives you a few questions to consider. What makes me sing? So that's energetic, coming from inside. What makes me cry? Well, that is probably either it's so beautiful it makes you cry, or you feel somebody else's pain. What makes me dream is what you do as you're falling asleep is dreaming, and that, um, in fact, I think oftentimes when we're in a quiet place, either watching a campfire burn or maybe watching the ocean flow and the birds and sea, fish flowing by, and there might be a small voice that speaks to you and surprises you and scares you maybe. But often I think is how dreams show up. And do you trust yourself to take the first step towards your dream? Then what makes you excel? What your talents are that you have that maybe nobody else has, and what makes you different. I've I can remember thinking a lot as a teenager how I was different. Some of it was, no, you can't go dancing. We don't believe in dancing. So that made me different. I was often bigger than my classmates, taller, and that made me different, and all kinds of, and I had to get used to being different. And then it got to a place where I think I bragged about being different because that's my uniqueness.
I love that you embraced your difference. Your again, that's again authenticity, and embracing that is something that a lot of people struggle to fit in all the time, and they're struggling. For a lot of them, they struggle to find connection because they're trying to assimilate and fit in with everyone else around them.
Yeah.
And it can be very hard, especially in small bubbles or small environments.
Mhm.
And for a lot of people, they either move country or they move to a big city because there's more likely they're going to find the right clique for themselves that way. And also with the internet as well nowadays, we're able to connect with people all around the world. But I feel that a lot of people try so hard to fit in with a certain group because they're afraid of, again, the vulnerability, the fear of rejection, the fear of being alone, that they don't express themselves authentically online either. And with that comes the fear of never knowing if they were to express themselves online with their true values, being true to themselves, will they ever find someone else like them?
Yeah, in fact, vulnerability is one of the things I like to talk about. Because Brene Brown calls it, the willingness to show up and be seen without any expectation of the outcome. And how that matters to me is I found that when I stick my neck out, show up, and blurt out something that seems important to me, or that I sense is drawing me to relate to you, that when I say what's on my heart, then putting it out there, well, in fact, it ties into my certification in knowledge management. And the thing about knowledge management, that my main principle I learned is that when I put out on the table what I know, and Eugene puts out on the table what he knows, the possibility of new knowledge coming about is very, very likely, because now we've combined, we've collaborated, and we're now able to create, a new idea, a new possibility, or I have experience with this. If we apply it to this project, we might have a success here. So maybe that's why the vulnerability is kind of new knowledge happens when we share, when each one of us shares. So does that connect to anything with you, Eugene?
Yeah, I think a lot of people hold back on sharing that knowledge with others because they're afraid of rejection or afraid of judgment. Is
Judgment,
not
yeah,
Judgment is a big one.
yeah.
And we see that not only in social groups or in dating or like in relationships or in the workplace, especially in the workplace. People who don't share their opinions because they're afraid of being judged for having a different opinion, rather than celebrating having a different opinion, being like, you know what, that's something that no one else in the team has brought up. Thank you for bringing that to the table. And part of that is, again, leadership, not being open minded enough to accept alternatives. Now, they don't need to, just because someone has suggested something, we need to implement it. But you bring the discussion to the table and you see, okay, what does everyone else think about this? Could this be a possible option? And even in allowing people to bring suggestions to the table, creating that open communication within a
Yeah,
business
yeah,
builds trust, builds connection. Now you
yeah,
don't need to implement everything that every employee says, but by accepting and making yourself more approachable, then you're allowing everyone come to the table and helping everyone in everyone in the team to grow.
yeah. I started a meetup group, and it quickly grew to 20 people. And I started bringing to the group one question each week, and everybody had to answer the one question. And sometimes it was strange things like, if I was a color, what color would it be? Purple. um, but everyone, I mean, the same 20 people answering the same question, it taught me how amazingly different people had different answers to the same question. It was just amazing, and we all learned something because they all had different perspectives. So it has to be a safe place for people to be different and okay. And another thing I wanted to bring up, Eugene, is when I started saying, I'm doing the best I know how, it helped me stop judging myself, and especially around weight control. Um, because I've always tended to be bigger than other people. Of course, I'm judging and comparing and all that stuff. But when I started saying I'm doing the best I know how, I'm giving myself a break. And I was started doing that with others. And they're doing the best they know how. My parents were doing the best they know how. It lets go of all that critical voices in your head. And what a relief.
Yes, it takes the let's say, over expectations of others out of it, or what's within your control, what's not within your control.
Mhm,
And yeah, for a lot of people, they hold resentment over others and resentment over themselves for not being in control. But as you said very, very well there about, I'm doing the best with what I know. That gives you two options. It's like, okay, this is me doing my best. If it's not working for me, maybe there's someone else out there who knows better, who can help me.
mhm,
Or this is the best I know. It's like, so you either get the help, or it's like, maybe I need to do more research myself.
mhm,
Maybe what I've been trying isn't working to the best of my knowledge. Let's try something else.
mhm,
And it's being open to, again, it's admitting failure or admitting a mistake, and then reiterating, reevaluate and reiterate. And being like, okay, I've been trying this thing for the last 5 years, it's not working. Maybe there's something else out there that will work for me. And it's a lot of people are just too stubborn to admit that something's not working for them, or that they've made a mistake somewhere along the line. And, oh, I failed. The people who succeed are the ones who are failing the most. They're acknowledging the failures and reiterating. It's not that they've
mhm.
succeeded 10 times, it means that they've failed 1,000 times and learned what does not work.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so how are we doing on time here? Oh, I also want to bring up this ties into the effortless vitality. And I've heard a few times of actors who say, when you see what you're here for, you suddenly find yourself on stage in a play written expressly for you. And actors who have said when that happens, it's just the most amazing feeling. I want you to know who you are and why you're here, and you'll find yourself on a stage in a play written expressly for you. What a feeling that would be. Let's reach for that, the courage to reach for that.